learning outcomes. After studying this module, you shall be able to know about the significance of drug-related crimes, demarcation between drug-induced crimes and related crimes, the types of drugs related with crimes and their psychology. Let us start with the introduction. The main organized crime activity is the supply of unlawful goods and services to unaccountable numbers of citizens and consumers. It is also intensely involved in legitimate business and in labor unions. It employs illegal methods like exploitation, radicalism, coercion, and tax evasion to turn or control the lawful rights and governance, and to extract the illegitimate returns from the public. Organized crime also degrades public representatives to deter legislative intervention and is becoming gradually refined. In India, additionally to its traditional domains of activities which incorporated extortion, seeking protection money, contract killing, bootlegging, gambling, prostitution and smuggling, and now added is the drug trafficking, among other drug-related crimes. Drug-related crime is assessed to reason for a large portion of the economic and social costs of illicit drug usage and also to form a huge portion of overall crime. However, when evaluating the criminal activity, it is awfully challenging to sort out crime which is directly caused by drug use from the crime that is associated to drug use but is initiated by other factors. The peculiarity is significant because when calculating the costs and benefits of drug policy reform, only crime which is triggered by drug abuse or use should be considered. Drug-related crime indisputably accounts for a large part of the peripheral costs of illicit drug use. In a substantially quoted paper, Goldstein in the year 1985 made a distinction between three types of drug-induced crime. First, the economic compulsive crime arises from a requirement for the extra income to fund the drug purchases made indispensable by obsessive drug use. Second type is the psychopharmacological crime, which is behavioral, generated by the action of drugs on the brain, ensuing in debilitated self-control or decision-making capacity or the violent responses to external provocation. And third one is the systemic violence, which is seen as a feature of the functioning of illicit markets, where legitimate implementation of contracts is impossible. The economic compulsive crime may recount to any form of strongly desired consumption, not only prohibited drugs. Some people may commit crime to generate money, to buy alcohol, tobacco, clothes, etc. To these direct forms of drug-related crime, a long-run indirect effects may be added, which are hard to evaluate but may be important. For instance, if drug use damages logical capability, educational achievement and employment prospects, avaricious offense turn out to be more recompensating comparative to the legal earnings generating activity, and the crime becomes a rational response to lack of opportunity for some. Most crimes result from a range of factors like personal, situational, cultural, or the economical. Even when drugs are a cause, they are expected to be only one factor among many. Next is economic compulsive drug-related crimes. Dependency on an expensive substance or drug can lead users to involve in criminal acts to obtain the money they use to fund their drug habit. They may recourse to both consensual crimes such as drug peddling or prostitution and acquisitive crimes, example shoplifting, robbery, burglary. Such offenders are sometimes remunerated in drugs. This class of drug-related crime also contains the counterfeiting of prescriptions and the burglarizing of drugstores by drug users, both of which provide medicine that can be used as substitutes for illicit products. Although many covetous crimes committed by the drug users are unscrupulous, some call for more proficiency and others involve less specialization. For example, fraud and embezzlement are white-collar crimes that require a specific professional environment. While the term compulsive proposes that a state of dependence is necessary, offenders in this category include all those whose drug use needs to be maintained by the illegal income, which will be determined by their type and pattern of substance use, socioeconomic situation, and the extent of aberrant lifestyle. Certainly, not all those who are reliant on expensive drugs commit economic crime. They may standardize their use according to their pecuniary resources and drug expenses, effort to upsurge their genuine income like the social remunerations, employment, pawning goods, or avoid expenses by taking full advantage of income in accommodation, meals, etc. Many drug users use a combination of all these means. Next is the psychopharmacological crimes. According to the psychopharmacological prototype of drug-related crimes, the acute or chronic use of psychoactive substances may result in aggression and violence. The effects of such drugs include impulsiveness, irritability, fear of paranoia, disinhibition, severe mood swings, perceptive alterations, and impaired judgment, any of which may lead to immoral conduct. It is also imperative to include in this category the crimes prompted by the victim's personal drug use. Such crimes are less noticeable because countless goes unreported. Thus, psychopharmacological crimes should also consist of crimes such as sexual assault committed while the victim is under the effect of alcohol or other psychoactive substances, but also the burglary or assault that is made imaginable because of the victim's helplessness and fights started under the influence of drugs. Much of the prevailing study supports the view that there is a strong association between alcohol intoxication and the psychopharmacologically induced crime, especially violence. Following a long way behind alcohol in this regard are the stimulants like cocaine and amphetamines. The use of opiates and cannabis is generally considered to be implausible to lead to psychopharmacologically induced crimes and may even contribute to reducing it in some individuals, as these drugs and tranquilizers have a tendency to reduce the violent impulses and aggressions. However, irritability associated with the withdrawal symptom as well as the related psychological health complications may be linked to increased violence. While the pharmacology of most illegal drugs is well known, the detailed mechanisms through which they promote violent behaviors are not completely understood. Although some substances, usually the stimulants, are recognized to produce psychotic events of behavior and may well aggravate the existing behavioral problems. That supposed no psychoactive substance can be said to have the universal criminogenic properties, and both the individual and environmental factors can influence the use of psychoactive substances, impacting upon the behavior. Next is the systemic violent crimes. The systemic criminality talks about mainly two violent acts such as assaults, homicides committed within the functioning of illicit drug markets or as part of the business of drug supply, distribution and use. Violence as an approach of control is used in various situations including the territorial disputes, punishment for frauds, debt collection and clashes with the police. In drug production and transportation, the countries where the rule of law is challenged, systemic crimes may also comprehend. For example, corruption of businesses, governments, and banking systems or crimes against humanity by drug traffickers. Systemic violence is associated to prohibition as it stems mainly from the illicit nature of a market regarded as by the huge profits and whose participants cannot resort to typical business law. There is no inherent link with drug use, and it is less clear in common whether drug trafficking or drug use leads to systemic crime or the contrary, or even whether they are just part of the identical overall lifestyle. However, the generality of violence in drug markets may increase the probability of drug users becoming offenders and victims of violent crimes. Some reviewers have contended that a large portion of the drug-related crime, specifically the violent crime, is the outcome of market forces. Nevertheless, it is more to be expected that systemic criminality follows a recurring sequence, responding to modifications in the dynamics of explicit drug markets such as the changes in drug demand and drug supply, in cost effectiveness and in community standards related to acceptance or rejection of the violent behaviors. Next, about the contemporary situations. Drugs are interrelated to crimes in various ways. Most directly, it is a crime to use, possess, manufacture and dispense drugs categorized as having a potential for abuse such as cocaine, heroin, marijuana and amphetamines. Drugs are also linked to crime through the effect that they have on the user's behavior and by generating the violence and other unlawful activities in connection with the drug trafficking. Drugs and crime relationship can be differentiated into certain types, what we will discuss here. First is drug-defined crimes. Violation of laws barring or regulating the possession, use, dissemination or production of the illegal drugs are the factors contributing to this type of crime. For example, the possession or use of drugs, cultivation of marijuana or illegal production of cocaine, heroin and methamphetamine. Next is the drug-related crimes. Crimes to which a drug's pharmacologic effects contribute fall under this category. Offences motivated by the consumer's need for money to support the sustained use of drugs are also the contributing feature, and apparently the offences connected to the drug distribution itself. An additional dimension of drug-related crime is committing an offence to get money or goods to sell to get money so as to support the drug use. Next is drug-using lifestyle. It can be denoted as a lifestyle in which the chances and frequency of involvement in the illegal activity are amplified because drug users may not take part in the legitimate economy and are exposed to situations that encourages the crime. The evidences indicates that drug users are more expected than non-users to commit crimes that convict frequently were under the influence of drug at the time they committed their offense, and the drugs generate violence. Evaluating the nature and extent of the influence of the drugs on crime requires that reliable information about the offense and the criminal is available and the explanations be consistent. India has an oppressive anti-drug law, the Narcotics, Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act of 1985, which provides a minimum punishment of 10 years for offences under this act. The conviction rate in drug offences is rather low. Next, we will study about the redefined drug-related crimes. Trafficking in illicit drugs have a tendency to be associated with the commission of violent crimes. Reasons for the association between drug trafficking and violence includes rivalry for drug markets and customers, disagreements and frauds among individuals involved in the illegal drug market, and the tendency towards violence of individuals who contribute in drug trafficking. In addition, the locations in which the street drug markets proliferate tend to be deprived economically and socially. Legal and social controls against the violence in such areas tend to be ineffective. The proliferation of lethal weapons in recent years has also made drug violence more deadly. Although the number of drug-related homicides has been decreasing in recent years, drugs still remain one of the main causes leading to the total number of all homicides. The illicit trafficking in narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances poses a grave intimidation to the health and welfare of the people and the activities of persons engaged in such illicit circulation, having an undermining effect on the national economy. It is imaginably the most severe organized crime affecting the country and is actually transnational in character. India is geographically located between the countries of Golden Triangle and the Golden Crescent, and is a transit point for the narcotic drugs produced in these regions to the west. India also produces a substantial amount of illicit opium, part of which also finds a place in the prohibited market in different forms. Illicit drug trade in India focuses around 5 major substances, namely heroin, hashish, opium, cannabis and methaqualone. Seizures of cocaine, amphetamine and LSD are not known but are minor and infrequent. Violations of drug-related law may include the drug law offences such as drug use, possession, cultivation, production, importation and trafficking, but also other allied offences such as the illicit manufacture and trafficking of precursors or money laundering. Drug driving, that is driving under the influence of drugs, offences are also included in this category of drug-related crime. Studies of drug-related crime have often ignored the drug law offences, as the relationship between drugs and crime is of very different nature. In this case, the drugs and crime are linked by the definition in the law rather than by any effect of one behavior or the other. Such offences are indeed essentially dependent on the prohibition of a set of psychoactive substances. However, it is important to consider the illicit status of these drugs, as it is a factor in drug market violence and may exacerbate economically motivated offending by increasing the drug prices. In addition, drug law offences account for a substantial share of the law enforcement and the criminal justice system activities and resources. Drug use may also have an indirect impact on the crimes other than the drug law offences. Indeed, from an economic perspective, which views crime as a reaction to prices and incentives, may increase in the proportion of available resources allocated to the enforcement of drug laws, would reduce the resources allocated to other crimes. This would make such crimes relatively less costly through reduced probability of arrest and shortened incarceration, and therefore may increase their incidence. Now, summary. First, drug-related crime is assessed to reason for a large portion of the economic and social expenses of the illegal drug use, and also to make up a large share of the total crime. Drugs are related to crime in manifold traditions. More unswervingly, it is a crime to use, possess, manufacture, or distribute drugs classified as having a potential for abuse. A variety of reasons and conditions lead to antisocial and drug-using populations to follow a diversity of pathways, each of which may express a precise connection between the drugs and crime. Reactions to challenge the drug-related crime, therefore, needs to be multifaceted, differentiated, and targeted. Many illegal drug users commit no other kinds of crime, and many individuals who commit crimes never use illegal drugs. However, at the most extreme levels of drug use, drugs and crime are directly and highly interconnected, and serious drug use can augment and disseminate pre-existing criminal activity. Reasons for the relationship between drug trafficking and violence contains the competition for drug markets and customers, disputes and scams among individuals involved in the illegal drug market, and the affinity towards the violence of individuals who share in drug trafficking. The propagation of lethal weapons in recent years has also made drug violence more deadly. Although the number of drug-related homicides has been decreasing in recent years, drugs still remain one of the reasons leading to the total number of all homicides. Violations of drug-related legislation may include drug law offences such as the drug use, possession, cultivation, production, importation and trafficking, but also other related offences such as the illicit manufacture and trafficking of precursors or money laundering. Thank you.